You've done so many things for us, so many powerful things, and you have saved us from so many situations, both physical and spiritual. And I pray that as I speak these words, that they will help reveal that to us, that you are always with us and that you will always be there for us. I pray that my words will be preaching that. And I pray this all in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, 2 disclaimers before we start. One, I have not rehearsed this all the way through. So I don't know if we'll be here for an hour or if we'll be here for 15 minutes. So, just be warned. Second thing, I have quite a bit of notes, and because this is kind of a little bit convoluted and long, I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot. So I'll be looking down and not at you. But hopefully that won't distract anybody. So for today's lesson that we're going to be studying, it's mercy. And I want to really focus in just mercy. And I want everybody, if you can, just think what mercy means. Kind of your own words. The reason why I want you to do that is because we're going to be going through and seeing 4 things. What is mercy? Why do we need mercy? Is mercy just? And finally, kind of the end, what was the purpose of mercy? So 4 things. So, cool thing that I learned about the word mercy this week, it means from a Latin word, derives from a Latin word, price paid. And the connotation was that you owned something, and if somebody broke it, you would be like, it's okay, I pay for that. But that's just a little bit of background on the word mercy, so kind of a linguistic. So, to start off, let us go to Genesis chapter 1, which I believe is the first instance of God's mercy. So Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. And while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. I wanted to read to you first part of Genesis chapter 1, and that's verses 1 and 2. We see here a state. God tells us the state of the world. He gives us a very detailed description, really. And I'd like to break it down. What is the state of the earth? We see that it is dark. Darkness is covering the face of the earth. That's one thing. Not necessarily a good thing to be covered with darkness. Second thing, a formless void. I was thinking about that, formless. You know, you're living in this formless void. When you are in a formless void, it's hard to have a hope. Because to have a hope, you need to form something. You need to have an idea to grasp on to this or that. We don't see that here. This is formless. There's nothing to grasp onto. And then the next thing is we see this idea of the deep waters covering the face of the earth. I know, Dawn, you've had some experience in boats. Water can be very powerful. You look at the tsunamis and different weather phenomena, hurricanes, typhoons. The water can be a very chaotic thing. And in that point, I want to make it that water really kind of equates to chaos, a disorienting thing. So, we see this state. We have darkness, we have hopelessness, we have chaos. This is the state of the earth at this point. Let's break it down a little farther. That darkness is not just a physical darkness. And I want to bring this to the people, how we can apply this to ourselves. This could be a spiritual darkness. We are in spiritual darkness sometimes when we begin our journey with God. In the beginning, there was darkness. Next thing, that formlessness I want to get back to. Without God, we can be hopeless. And I see so many people. And it's sad. You see that they can't pinpoint anything in their life to really hope for or to achieve. And that kills them because there is no hope. So we're also formless. We're also hopeless. Third thing, back to that water and the chaotic feeling when you're in it. It can be disorienting, like we said, and in life, it's chaotic. It can disorient you. It can drag you down. Sometimes you don't even know what's going on. You see that too in a lot of people's lives, that so many things are happening so fast that you can't see things straight. This is the state of the world. This is our state when we begin our journey with Christ. Now, with all of this, the world is in a state of death. And the reason why we know that is because God mentions nothing about green plants, animals. There is nothing here that he says it's good and it's alive. Nowhere in here. So at this moment, we are dead, and we can easily take death to mean a state of sin. So the world is in a state of sin or a state of death. Now, we see this. We have these two verses, a dead planet, no life, no hope. And what does God respond with? I'm going to suggest two alternate endings to this story. One, God seeing the world and its incredible problems could in his infinite justice said, this place needs to be destroyed. This is of no use to me. This is a fixer-upper and I don't want that. He could have blasted the world out of existence, turned it to atoms. And to some, that might seem like justice. You know what? This had nothing to offer us. You destroyed it. That's fair, Lord. There's better places out there, a better goal, something easier to work on. But God is not afraid of work. We'll see that throughout this story. God is not afraid of taking a hard case. He sees a mountain, I can climb it. Maybe there's a path around it, but I can climb this mountain. He proves that to us through this story. So it was not God's plan to destroy the earth. Second alternate ending, God could have, in his infinite mercy, said, this place is maintenance free. I could leave this place for 1,000,000 years and nothing is going to look any worse than it is right now. He could have said, it's fine. Let's move on. I don't want to climb that mountain. Let's just lay down here at the base of it. No need to build up anything. And that could have been the end. Our world could have been left in a state of death for all eternity. God decided, though, that is not my plan. God decided not to show the world the justice it deserved, and he decided, too, not to just show it mercy. He decided to show a wise path, a wise decision that tempers mercy with justice. And as our lesson was talking about grace and the law, God is always balancing things out. He's always holding things in his hand, feeling what is the best thing I can do. He doesn't take the easy route. He doesn't take the simple path. So, as we see here, the world could have ended at this very moment. We could have closed the Bible and said there was a dead place. We went there, we saw it, we destroyed it. We went there, we saw it, we left it as it was, and that could have been the end. But God does not believe that would have been merciful or just to leave the world in its state. So I would like now to begin Genesis 1, verse 3 through 5. And what does God say? Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. God immediately recognized that this place is in trouble. He immediately recognized the need for a revelation. And then we get to our first point. We need a spiritual revelation, because the state we are in, we cannot even perceive, because you need light to see things. At this point, we cannot see our state until God gives light. And we see that. What a beautiful thing. To something that was dark for so long, and there to be finally light. That light can help bring some measure of order to this void. That light can help us see some hope. Maybe things can be different. And this is the part I love about it. And you'll hear some people talk about this, and they call it kind of a critique against God. There was no sun yet. God realized the urgency, the urgent need for light. This isn't something we can wait on. This isn't like maybe we'll start planning a vacation next year. This is something that needs to happen right now. And he was so in tune with that urgent need that he said, I can't even waste time building a sun. I just need to get to work. We need light. God transcends all the physical assets at his ability and uses his spiritual assets. And is it not beautiful, though, that that is enough? That he doesn't need the physical. He doesn't need Dawn, Elias, Francine, Francie, Nathan. He doesn't need any of us. God can show us our need with that simple voice, that spirit. His spirit. And it is sufficient. So there we have revelation. One thing, too, it must be mentioned. It's sufficient, that light. God all the time is sufficient. He is always capable. We can't forget that. That is day one. And the verse I chose to go with this topic of revelation is Romans 2, verse 14 and 15. When Gentiles who do not possess the law do instinctively what the law requires, these, though not having the law, are a law to themselves. They show that what the law requires is written on their hearts, to which their own conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts will excuse them. This idea that we don't have any physical assets to reach out to these people. God can reach out. Across the void, across the darkness, he can reach the people, and he is sufficient. Day 2, Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, and it was so. And God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. Right now we immediately see God is bringing some order to this chaos. We have this water. We have no atmosphere. Let us start to build stuff. He's kind of beginning the work. And the first thing he does is something that we physically need. We need an atmosphere on this place. I'm no astronomer, but you look out at the moon, some of the planets, they're pretty bleak looking. Dark places. Not too unsimilar from what we were before. They don't have an atmosphere, some of them. And that makes a terrible place to live. God realizes that his creatures that he has in mind will need certain things, certain physical assets. And God is willing to meet that need. I'd like to go now to Exodus chapter 16, verses 3 and 4. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us out of this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them whether they will follow my instructions or not." And we could go further into that, but it gets the point across. God cares about our physical needs. He's not going to lead us out into the wilderness and say, "Well, good luck. You can go scrounge some bugs up underneath a rock. I love you guys." That is not what God does. He provides for our physical needs. And in this walk, in this journey, we've had a revelation. But it was a spiritual revelation, a spiritual darkness we were in. Just because we are now talking about spiritual things does not mean that God is done taking care of physical needs. He will take care of our needs. He realizes there's many things we need to live. We need food, we need clothing, shelter, and God is willing to take care of those details. Day 3, Genesis 1, verses 9 through 13. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and the fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with seed in it." And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, and plants yielding seed of every kind, and the trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. God's revealed to us things. God has taken care of our physical needs, and now God is trying to build us up here. This is kind of the first step towards a productive life. I found it a little bit ironic, we call it earth. This idea of dirt, Adam, dirt. At this point, there was no dirt visible. It was all covered over. To the casual observer, they would not have seen the materials to build Adam. They would have only seen the water. They would have only seen the void, the darkness. But God can see. His eyes are different eyes than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. So our first thing here is patience. We need to have patience for this process. We're seeing a process that's taking days. This did not happen in a second. This rebirth, this regrowth, this did not happen immediately. So we need to be patient. James chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. So be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, and being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Here we see him mention patience. We do need that. It's critical to our walk. Sometimes we're not going to be moving as fast as we thought we would be, but we have to trust that the Lord has a plan, that the Lord is in control. And also brought into this is the idea of plants. We see in this same day, he's not only talking about patience, but he's talking about planting things. I have a question, and you don't have to answer it, but just think about it. What does a good plant do? A tomato plant, they grow. I hear Francine there mentioning growing fruit. That's a good thing. This process of growth, though, we are not going 0 to 100 instantly. We are not going to be in this state of darkness and be in a state of perfection. It's going to take growth, and that's all right. We have patience. Growth is all right. We can wait. The second thing, God in this creation shows we need a solid foundation. I'd like to focus on him bringing out the earth. We need earth to build on. Something to focus on. Something that's solid and not going to fall away. It's hard to build something on the water. That is one task I have never tried, building in the water. God realizes that might not be the best plan. So, I would like to go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 and 25. Matthew 7, verse 24 and 25. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. We're starting this journey with Revelation again. Physical needs have been met. We have patience. We're going to start seeing growth now, finally. But we need a solid foundation too. It's critical. Here, Christ is laying out that who hears these words of mine. So we need to build on the words of Christ. We need to build on God's word. So we have that solid foundation. Now, we move on to day 4. Genesis 1, verse 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the dome of sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 4th day. God is continuing to work on this place. He's continuing to bring about order to this chaos. And the first thing now that he sees as a necessity, we need order. We need law and order. If you look at the Bible, you see constantly these mentions of time, and time being intermixed with God's law. And it is. Law and order are 2 things. They're inseparable. And this is bringing about that order. It's bringing about that law. I think, too, it needs to be mentioned here, the darkness is not completely gone. There is still darkness. There is still a night, still a remembrance of that old state. But it no longer rules over us all the time. It is no longer the chief thing in our lives. I would like to go now, Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, and you shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. You can't get away from the fact that the law is mixed with time. So we see that law and order. So we need to, at this point, there will be a certain order in our lives, a certain law coming into our lives that'll be growing in us. Day 5. This is when we finally start to see life as we kind of recognize it, animals and fish, birds. So, day 5, Genesis 1, verses 20 through 25. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." And so God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind, with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. And forgive me, I want to add this to it. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so, and God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of the earth. And God saw that it was good. I wanted to add that there too, because God at this point is filling up this earth, adding things to it. And when he's adding these things to it, he's calling it good. I fill up the waters with fish, it looks good. I fill up the air with birds, it looks good. I fill up the land with animals, it looks good. And that's why I wanted to add that to it. I know it didn't happen on day 5 for the animals, but it was the same thing going on. We need to be filled with good things. God wants the earth to be filled with good things. And we look and we see, and I brought up 2 things. Matthew 12, verses 43 through 45. Matthew 12, verse 43 through 45. And when the unclean spirit was gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions looking for a resting place, but it finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. When it comes, it finds it empty. And I want to focus that word, empty. Swept and put in order. And then it goes and brings along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and live there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. So will it be also with this evil generation. This process that we're going through, it requires that we be filled by something. And if we don't fill ourselves with something, well, bad things will come in its place eventually. We cannot just be an empty vessel. We have to be a vessel filled with good. So our time, our very being, it must be filled with good things. And then day 6. Genesis 1, verse 26 through 31. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And so God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, see, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and morning, the 6th day. At this moment, God is topping it off. He's finally come to a point where we've slowly built up. I can put righteous people on this planet. We've finally kind of graduated. And this is the point where God wants it. He wants that very good. He wants that perfection, that crowning moment. And that's why we have righteous people there at the end. These people are no longer living in a world of darkness, no longer in a world of hopelessness, no longer in a world of chaos. There is order, there is law, there is growth. So many things here. The physical needs are met. And they have a spiritual revelation from God, and that has led them to be on a spiritual journey with God. And God not only just wants them to sit. That's a terrible thing to just sit down. He has made these people like himself, people that will climb the mountains, that will do what needs to be done. And they aren't going to take the easy route. This is what the image of God is. Something that is a spirit, a will. And God has given his people this will. And God has given them the tools that they need to accomplish this goal of maintaining the garden, of keeping everything in order. God has made it a world at which point now he could leave and it would be all right. At least that was the hope. These are people that have been given the tools to survive on this world, that have been given the ability to prosper. And we can finally say, God made the right choice. God could have turned away from the world, but he didn't. He showed mercy to it. And it was always for the hope of this end goal, this righteous people, that they can prosper and live. They were his children, and they are finally grown up. And even though, from some standpoints, I think any of us could be accused of this, sometimes we look at things and they look dead. They are dead. But we have a God that is beyond death. He knows about death, but death is not the only thing he knows about. He knows life. This is the mercy that we see here. A mercy for the hope of something better. For the hope of a prosperous people. People that will function and thrive. That was always God's hope. It wasn't, I'll show this place mercy because I'm lazy. I don't want to get up and judge anybody. That would have been terrible. To live in this darkness forever. For this world to continue the way it is without God forever, that would not have been mercy. That would not have been justice. While, on the other hand, it would have been evil, too, in God's eyes, if he had destroyed it. Because he saw what it could become. You know, dirt's nothing special. But God can make it special. His breath of life. So, I'd like everybody just to think on that, remember what you were thinking at the beginning when I asked you for mercy. What does that mean? I think when God says that mercy, he means 100%. This is not the state that we're going to be in forever, but for the hope of seeing growth and seeing life in his creation. That is the end of my sermon. Pastor Don, if you could close us out with prayer.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that you did see fit to exhibit mercy in behalf of this earth. Not something you were required to do, but you saw it as a fit place to put a people that you would like to see grow into your image more fully. We thank you that your mercy is still active, that it's part of our lives, and that it's there for a purpose, that it has a plan. Thank you for the thoughts Elias shared with us today. There's things there I hadn't thought of. The connection between law and time was a special one to me, how you set up the sun to rule the day, you set things in order, and made sense out of chaos, and you can do that in our lives today. We thank you for it. We see it now as an act of mercy. We thank you for your mercy as exhibited to us individually. May this be a blessed week for us. And May we grow in our relationship with you as we experience it. In Jesus' name.